My name is Morgan Bennett, 38 years old. Last Tuesday in a North Carolina courtroom, my sister Caitlin looked straight at me and said, "You stole my children, you bitter, childless. You kidnapped them and brainwashed them for 11 years. She sat there wearing a 4-carat ring, smiling for the cameras while her 3 children, the one she abandoned on my porch with a half-empty bottle of formula, sat 2 benches behind her. She didn't even recognize her own middle child. I didn't raise my voice. I simply slid one envelope across the table. The judge opened it, read the first line, and the entire courtroom went silent. Caitlin thought she was coming back to take everything. She had no idea I had been waiting 11 years for this exact moment. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever been called a thief for raising someone else's child? If family betrayal, long-buried truth, and quiet justice are your thing, you're in the right place. Subscribe for the full story. Before I show you what was inside that envelope, let me take you back to the night this whole thing actually started. August 14, 2014, 11:32 at night. A quiet street in Cary, North Carolina. But first I want you to see the house she walked into 11 years later, because that house is the receipt nobody talks about. It is a 3-bedroom on a cul-de-sac, white trim brick. I bought it in 2017 for $315,000 after I gave up on the wedding I was supposed to have, and the apartment I was supposed to live in. The refrigerator has 3 calendars stuck to it with magnets shaped like oranges. One for softball, one for robotics, one for gymnastics. There is a Polaroid pin next to them with a corner torn off. The torn corner is missing the woman in the picture. I work 12-hour shifts in the emergency room at a community hospital 20 minutes from here. I make $78,000 a year. I have not had a date in 4 years. I have not had a vacation that did not involve a state tournament since 2019. I do not say any of this for sympathy. I say it because on the night Caitlin showed up in court in a 4-carat ring smiling for the cameras, the prosecutor of my life was her, and the defense was a refrigerator with 3 calendars on it. The morning before Caitlin's email arrived, my niece Lily had just gotten the call from the University of North Carolina. Full ride softball. A coach who'd been watching her since she was 13. Lily walked into the kitchen holding her phone like it was made of porcelain. She didn't cry. She put the phone down on the counter and said, "Auntie Mo, can you sign this by Friday? Coach needs it." I signed it on Tuesday, 2 days early. My best friend Annabelle, who has been a nurse with me for 9 years, brought me coffee at the start of my shift. She looked at my face and said, "You sleep yet? 3 hours." Lily got into UNC. Full ride. They called yesterday. Annabelle has known me long enough not to ask the follow-up. She just touched my elbow once and walked on. There is a kind of friendship that's built in trauma bays at 3 o'clock in the... I was 26. I had been a nurse for 2 years. I came home at 10:30 from a double, kicked off my shoes in the entryway, and ate a piece of dry cereal standing over the sink because there was no milk in the fridge. My phone was charging in the bedroom. I was going to shower and sleep and not think about the patient who had coded on me at 7:56. I heard a car pull onto the lawn instead of the driveway. I heard a door slam, then a knock. I opened the door at 11:32 at night. Caitlin was standing on the porch in a denim jacket that didn't fit her. Her pupils were too wide for the porch light. Her hair was pulled back with a rubber band. She smelled like vodka and hand sanitizer. She had a diaper bag over one shoulder. Lily, 6 years old, was holding her left hand in pajamas with Hello Kitty on them. Ethan, Snorts, 4 years old, was clutching a wooden Thomas the Tank Engine to his chest with both arms like it was a life vest. And Madeline, 18 months old, was asleep against Caitlin's right shoulder, drooling onto her collar. Behind them, parked diagonally across my grass, was Caitlin's Honda Civic with the hatch open. There was a car seat lying on its side in the back. There was a half-empty plastic bottle of formula tipped over on the floor mat. There was a Sheetz receipt on the dashboard. I noticed that receipt because I notice everything when I'm tired. Caitlin said, "Just one weekend, Emo. I'm begging." I said, "Where are you going?" She said, "Just one weekend." She handed me Madeline first. Madeline didn't wake up. She didn't lift Ethan. He walked past me into the living room and sat down on the rug. Lily stayed in the doorway. Lily, 6 years old, looked up at me with the kind of expression people make at funerals. She didn't speak. The silence of a 6-year-old who is too tired to ask a question she already knows the answer to is something I will hear for the rest of my life. Caitlin set the diaper bag down inside the door. She kissed Madeline on the head. She did not kiss the others. She said, "Call Mom if you need anything." Then she walked back to the Civic, shut the hatch, and drove away. I stood there with an 18-month-old asleep on my shoulder. On Friday morning, I called Caitlin 9 times. Her phone rang to voicemail, then to nothing, then to nothing. On Saturday morning, I drove past her apartment on the way to the grocery store. The blinds were open. The apartment was empty. There was a for lease sign in the window that hadn't been there on Tuesday. On Sunday afternoon, I called her one more time. A recorded voice said, "This number has been disconnected and is no longer in service." On Monday morning, I called my mother. My mother said, "She needed a break, Emo. Just take the kids for a bit. She'll be fine." I want you to hear that sentence the way I heard it. The way a woman says it when she's been preparing the answer for 2 days. That was the first thing my mother said to me that I started saving. Not in writing. In my head. In a small locked place where I keep the things people say when they think you're not paying attention. The note was on the kitchen counter. I didn't read it until Monday night because I'd been too tired and too busy keeping a toddler alive. It was written on the back of a Sheetz receipt dated August 14th. The receipt showed a 1-gallon purchase of regular unleaded and 1 bottle of Smirnoff vodka paid in cash. On the back, in my sister's handwriting, were 5 words. "Just one weekend. Please." See, I still have that receipt. It is in a fireproof box in the back of my closet. Snorts is one of the first things I gave my lawyer when she finally became my lawyer 12 years later. It has Caitlin's fingerprints on it and a coffee stain in the bottom corner. The coffee stain is mine. I want you to remember it. I'll come back to it. By Wednesday, I had $400 in my checking account. A fiancé in Austin who didn't know yet that his life had just changed, and 3 small children. Eating Cheerios out of a paper towel in my kitchen because I'd run out of bowls. By Friday, I had a court-appointed legal aid lawyer my father quietly paid for. A copy of Caitlin's voluntarily relinquished parental rights notarized somewhere I didn't recognize, and an emergency hearing scheduled for February. I did not know my father had paid for it. I didn't find that out until 2026. What I did know in that first week was that Lily would not eat unless I sat at the table with her. Ethan would not sleep unless his Thomas train was on the pillow next to his head. And Madeline cried every time I tried to put her down in a crib she did not know. Garrett, my fiancé, flew in on Sunday. He stood in my living room for 15 minutes without saying anything. He watched Lily try to braid Madeline's hair on the floor. He watched Ethan line up his trains in a perfect curve along the baseboard. He watched me carry a basket of laundry up the stairs. He said, "How long is this going to be, Emo?" I said, "I don't know. Maybe a week." That conversation got longer over the next year. By September 2015, we were in the kitchen, and Lily was at the dining room table coloring, and Garrett said, "I didn't sign up for 3 kids, Emo." I said, "Neither did I." But they didn't sign up for being left either. He set the engagement ring on the TV stand. He said he was sorry. He said it the way men say it when they've already rehearsed the apology in the car on the way over. He drove back to Austin. He sent a Christmas card that year and the next, and then he stopped. I used the engagement ring as a paperweight on my desk for 9 years. I am telling you that not because it's poetic, but because it is true. Sometimes the cruelest thing about being abandoned twice in 1 year is that you start using the symbols as office supplies. The other thing that happened in 2015 was my father. My father, Edmund Bennett, was a bridge engineer who had retired early and didn't know what to do with himself. He shrugged on the bookshelf. "Lily knows." I said, "Lily knows what?" He said, "Lily knows where the key is. That's all she needs to know." I didn't ask. My father was not a man you asked. He died in June of 2019 of a stroke. He didn't tell anyone he was at risk for. He was 63. The funeral was at the Episcopal Church in downtown Cary, and my mother sat between Caitlin's empty chair and me. Caitlin did not come home. She sent flowers. The card said, "Sorry I can't be there. Love, Kate." Just like that. Kate, the nickname she hadn't gone by since she was 14. The will gave the safe to me. The line in the will was 8 words long. "Open only if Caitlin returns asking. Trust Morgan." I never opened it. I knew where the key was. Lily, then 11, brought me the copy of Atlas Shrugged the day after the funeral and set it on the coffee table without explanation. She said, "Grandpa told me to give this to you when he was gone." I said, "Did he say why?" She said, "He said you'd know when." I did not know when. I put the book back on the shelf. I left the key inside. 11-year-old children should not be in charge of legal evidence, but my father had reasons. I just didn't know them yet. The years between 2019 and 2026 are the part of this story I don't like talking about because nothing happened and everything happened. Lily turned 12, 13, 14. She made varsity softball as a freshman. Ethan started middle school and learned to play the saxophone badly. Madeline, who couldn't even remember her mother, started calling me Aunt Emo and meaning it the way other kids mean mom. My mother became the family go-between. She watched Caitlin's life through Instagram on her tablet. Caitlin had married a man named Trevor Whitaker in Naples, Florida in March of 2020. Trevor was 45 at the time. He was a psychiatrist. He had a private practice on the Gulf Coast. He had been a consulting psychiatrist at the Florida rehab Caitlin had stayed at in 2015, and they'd started dating in 2018, 2.5 years after she discharged. The way my mother told it, this was a beautiful love story. I went to the Naples Psych Group website once in 2021 because Madeline had asked, "Aunt Emo, who's the baby in this picture?" While looking at my mother's iPad. The picture was of Caitlin holding a baby named Jasper. I clicked through to the website to figure out who this man was who was raising my sister's new child. There was a Meet the Team page. Trevor was at the top. His arm was around Caitlin's shoulder. The caption read, Dr. and Mrs. Whitaker, proud parents of two, not 5. I screenshot that page. I didn't know why. I just did. I closed the iPad. I told Madeline, just a baby. Not our family. Madeline saved the photo to my phone before I could stop her. She didn't know what she was doing. She was 8. She was just curious about the chubby baby with my sister's eyes. That photo lived on my phone for 5 years. Beatrice Holloway zoomed in on it on a Tuesday afternoon in March of 2026 and said, Morgan, this is the linchpin. But I'm getting ahead of myself. On Valentine's Day of 2026, my mother called me. I was in the middle of a shift. I was standing in a hallway between Trauma Bay 1 and Trauma Bay 3, holding a paper cup of weak coffee. The man in Trauma Bay 1 was coughing up blood. The woman in Trauma Bay 3 had been brought in by EMS for an overdose. I was 9 hours into a 12, and I had nothing in the tank for my mother. She said, Caitlin's been doing better, you know? She's been asking about the kids. Just so you're prepared. I said, Mom, I have to go. I hung up. I want you to understand something about the moment right after that phone call. I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't tell Lily. I didn't tell Annabelle. I didn't tell my therapist, who I had stopped seeing in 2022 because therapy on a nurse's schedule is a joke. I just slid the phone into my scrubs pocket and walked into Bay 3 and pushed Narcan into a stranger's arm and watched her come back. The whole shift I had one thought running underneath everything else. Prepared for what? 3 weeks later on March 3rd the email came. Hi, it's me. Can we talk? I read it in my car in the hospital parking lot. I read it 3 times. Then I Googled my sister's name. The first result was a LinkedIn profile. Caitlin Bennett Whitaker, MA, mental health advocate, 4,200 followers. Profile photo taken on Naples Pier at sunset. A pinned post that read, Reclaiming my story as a survivor of medical trauma. I scrolled down to the About section. It said, I am the mother of 5 beautiful children. 3 of them are currently in the care of extended family, while I rebuild from medical trauma. 5. 3 of them. In the care of extended family. I sat in that parking lot for 11 minutes. I didn't cry. I screen captured everything. Every line. Every photo. The pinned post. The follower count. The location tag. I emailed it to myself with the subject Receipts 1. That night I found her podcast. Reclaim. Episode 12. Released February 28th. When Family Takes Your Children, A Survivor's Path Back. I listened to it on the drive home with the volume down so the children would not hear. In the episode, my sister said with a soft, even voice, They were taken from me during the worst period of my life. I'm grateful every day for my sister's help, but it's time for my children to come home. 11,000 listens. The top comment read, Praying for your reunion, Mama. I want to ask you a question. Have you ever heard yourself described in someone else's voice and realize that the description is being heard by people who will never know what actually happened? That's a different kind of theft. There's no language for it, but you know it when it happens. They take your 11 years and they call it babysitting. I didn't reply to the email. 2 days later, a text came in from a Florida area code, a number I didn't have saved. You don't get to decide that. See. An hour after that, a second text. Mom told me what house. I'm asking nicely. I saved the contact. I named it Do Not Open. That night, Lily, 18 years old, 6 days into being legally an adult, knocked on my bedroom door. She had her phone in her hand. She had been reading something on a school computer earlier that week about something called emancipated adult status and the difference between guardianship and parental rights and the rules around contracts signed by minors. She was wearing the UNC softball hoodie they'd mailed her the previous Friday. She said, "If she calls again, I want to be the one who tells her no." I said, "We'll talk about it tomorrow." She didn't go back to her room. She sat on the edge of my bed for 20 minutes. Then she said, "Aunt Mo, the grandpa thing in the closet, the safe, I'm allowed to tell you now, right?" I felt something cold sit on top of my chest. I said, "Tell me what?" She said, "Tomorrow." She kissed the top of my head, which is something she had never done in 18 years, and went to bed. If you're still with me, here's where it stops being a slow story. On March 21st, a Saturday at 6:12 in the evening, a Wake County deputy named Joseph Hartigan rang my doorbell. Madeline, 13, opened the door. She'd watched enough television to know what papers meant before he said the word. He said, "Ma'am, is Morgan Bennett home? I have papers." I came out of the kitchen drying my hands. He handed me a manila envelope. The first page was titled Petition for Emergency Custody and Restoration of Parental Rights. The second word on the third page was kidnapping. Underneath the petition was a temporary restraining order. I was not to remove the children from Wake County. I was not to allow any travel by any party. I was not to make any public statement about the children's biological mother, Petitioner Caitlin Bennett Whitaker of Naples, Florida. Counsel Vincent Caldwell, Esquire, Caldwell and Associates, Naples, Florida. Pro hac vice admission pending. North Carolina Associate of Record, Eugene Halstead, downtown Raleigh. Deputy Harrigan was kind enough not to look at Madeline. He just said, "Have a good evening, ma'am," and went back to his cruiser. The next morning, my face was in the newspaper. The headline in the Cary Citizen and the News and Observer read, "A Mother's Long Road Home. The Story Behind a Bennett Family Reunion." The article quoted Caitlin's lawyer and 3 family friends, all of whom were unnamed. It described Caitlin as a survivor of medical trauma, reclaiming her life. It described me as a controlling guardian and a childless aunt who refused contact. The byline noted in a smaller font at the bottom that the story had been released by Beacon Strategies Communications, Charlotte, North Carolina, a public relations firm. There was a public relations firm involved. I want you to sit with that for a second. She had hired a PR firm. Before she'd emailed me hello. Annabelle called me at 5:45 in the morning before my alarm went off. She said, "Mo, did you see the paper?" I said, "I see it." She said, "Get to the hospital before HR does." I didn't make it in time. By noon, my nurse manager had pulled me into the break room and told me gently that they were reassigning me to administrative duty pending an internal review. My name tag was taken off my locker door. They moved my photo off the staff board. The administrative duty was fine. The administrative duty was a room with a beige laminate desk and a printer that jammed every 12 pages. The administrative duty was also in front of 200 co-workers, a public statement that someone thought I might be a kidnapper. That night my mother called. She did not start with "How are you?" She said, "Morgan, why can't you just let her see them? Just a video call." "She's trying." I said, "Mom, she filed an emergency petition. She called me a kidnapper. In a newspaper." There was a 6-second silence. 6 full seconds. I counted. Then she said, "Well, you did keep them from her, Mo. You did." I hung up. I sat on the edge of the bed for 4 minutes. I did not cry. I felt the cold sit down on my chest again. I realized that my mother, who had raised both of us, had been a witness in a case I didn't know I was in, and she had chosen which side she was testifying for a long time ago. The next morning I called Beatrice Holloway. Beatrice Holloway is 51 years old. She is from Atlanta originally. She practiced as a prosecutor for 9 years before switching to family law, mostly because she raised 2 of her sister's children alone after her sister overdosed in 2007. I had met her once at a fundraiser for the Cary Public Library, and she had given me her business card and said, "If you ever need someone, call me." I had kept the card in my wallet for 4 years. She answered on the second ring. I said, "Beatrice, it's Morgan Bennett, the nurse. We met at the library." She said, "Morgan, I read the paper. I've been waiting for you to call." I said, "How did you know?" She said, "Because I read the paper. Bring me everything your father gave you, even the things you haven't opened." I drove to her office that afternoon. She has a small office in a brick building on Chatham Street, 2 doors down from a coffee shop. The waiting room had a single fiddle leaf fig and a bowl of butterscotch candies. On the side table, she sat behind a desk made of reclaimed oak. She opened a moleskine notebook with a black cover. She uncapped a Pilot G2 pen. She wrote 4 words at the top of the page. Documents. Witnesses. Timeline. Motive. She said, "Tell me everything. From the night she left them. Every detail. Don't edit." I talked for 2 hours and 17 minutes. I told her about the sheet's receipt. I told her about the disconnected number. I told her about my father's safe and the Atlas Shrugged book. I told her about the LinkedIn profile that called her the mother of 5. I told her about Trevor's website that called him the proud father of 2. I told her about my mother's 6-second silence. I told her about Lily standing in my doorway saying, "The grandpa thing in the closet. I'm allowed to tell you now, right?" Beatrice closed the moleskine. She put the pen down. She looked at me for a long moment. She said, "Morgan, go home. Open the safe. Call me when you have." I said, "Why now?" She said, "Because your father didn't put it in your closet for fun. He put it there for this. If you've ever raised someone else's child and watched the world rewrite who you are, drop a comment below and tell me what they called you when they didn't think you could hear." I read everyone. The next part of this story is the part where I stopped being someone things happen to. I want to set the scene for what came next because it matters. It was the player in North Carolina had ever signed. Lily's name was a trending hashtag for 48 minutes on a Tuesday in April. At 8:30 that night, Beatrice called my cell. She said, "Morgan, Halbert's announcement went live this morning. Caldwell's petition was filed on March 21st, 11 days before. He filed before Lily was legally an adult on purpose. That window, the one where a biological parent can claim override on a minor's contract, closes on May 4th, 30 days after her birthday. He timed everything. This is not about the kids." I sat down on the edge of the bed. I said, "It's about the money." She said, "It's about parental override. If Caitlin is restored as a legal parent before May 4th, she has standing to challenge the in-contract on behalf of a minor. Even retroactively, there are lawyers who will fight that. She might lose. But the point is she gets to the table. She gets a seat at Lily's table. And the only person who decides what happens at Lily's table is Lily. I said. She doesn't want her daughter. She wants leverage. Beatrice said. Now open the safe. I went to the utility closet. I pulled the atlas shrugged off the bookshelf. The key was taped to the inside of the back cover. The combination on the safe was a 6-digit number. 031656, my father's birthday, March 16, 1956. The lid opened on hinges that hadn't been used in 7 years. Inside, in neat stacks, my father had left me a war. On top, in a thin manila folder, was a document titled Voluntary Relinquishment of Parental Rights and Consent to Permanent Guardianship. It was signed by Caitlin Bennett. It was notarized on August 18, 2014, by a notary public named Ruth Pemberton of Asheville, North Carolina. The notary stamp was crisp and clean. The signature line had Caitlin's name in capital letters. The body of the document, 3 pages long, was unambiguous. I, Caitlin Bennett, of sound mind and full legal capacity, hereby voluntarily and permanently relinquish all parental rights to my 3 minor children, Lillian Bennett, Ethan James Bennett, and Madeline Grace Bennett, and consent to the appointment of my sister Morgan Bennett as their permanent legal guardian. I make this decision freely, without coercion, and with full understanding of its irrevocable nature. 3 pages, 3 signatures, 3 witnesses, 1 notary. Behind that was a court order. Wake County District Court Juvenile Division in the matter of the minor children Lily and Bennett, Ethan James Bennett, Madeline Grace Bennett. Order granting permanent guardianship to Morgan Bennett. Effective February 9, 2015. My father had paid for that. He had paid for a lawyer, filed the petition, attended the hearing, and never told me he had done it. He had quietly made me, in the eyes of the state of North Carolina, the legal mother of 3 children. He had done it without making me feel like I was being orchestrated. Behind the court order was a handwritten letter. The paper was lined yellow legal pad paper. The date in the top corner read, January 11, 2015. The location underneath read Sunrise Recovery, Fort Myers, Florida. The handwriting was Caitlin's. The letter was 4 paragraphs long. To whoever finds this, if I ever come back claiming these children, do not believe me. I am not their mother. I have not been for a long time. I left them on purpose. I had a chance to take them with me when I left, and I chose not to. Morgan has them. Morgan will keep them. If I come back asking, it will not be because I miss them. It will be because I need something. Do not let me undo what I have done. Caitlin Bennett. Behind the letter was a small manila envelope with a tape recording symbol drawn on it in black Sharpie. Inside was a micro SD card and a typed transcript and a handwritten transcript. The handwritten transcript was in my father's handwriting. He had transcribed the same 38 seconds 3 times. The 3rd time the word "rid" was traced over twice, like he had pressed harder when he got there. The voicemail had been left from Caitlin's old phone to her own voicemail box at 4:42 a.m. on January 9, 2015. It had been recorded onto her iCloud account, which my father had been the family manager of since 2009. He had listened to it 3 times in his car in the church parking lot. Then he had downloaded it onto a thumb drive, copied it to a micro SD, and locked it in the safe. I plugged the card into my laptop. I listened to it once. My sister's voice, slurred and laughing, said, "Don't worry about it. Mo's got them. She'll keep them. I just need to get rid of them on her. That's all. She'll keep them. Mo always keeps everything. That's what she's for. That's what big sisters are for. Don't call me back. 38 seconds. I want you to understand what that voicemail did to me. Sitting on my closet floor at 9:14 at night, 11 years and 7 months after the porch. It did not make me cry. It made me very, very quiet. There was one more thing in the safe, a second envelope sealed with packing tape with a notary stamp from Ruth Pemberton dated April 16, 2020. Lily's 12th birthday. The handwriting on the front of the envelope was in a child's careful block letters. For the judge. Open only when I am 18 or when she comes back. I sat with that envelope in my hand for 9 minutes. I did not open it. It was not mine to open. I called Beatrice back. I said, I have everything and one thing I'm not allowed to read. She said, bring it all in the morning. We have 5 weeks. I said, Beatrice, did you know my father? She said, I never met him. Why? I said, because he knew you'd be the one to do this. She didn't answer that. She just said, bring everything. I went downstairs and I made myself a cup of tea and I sat in the kitchen for 40 minutes and I didn't read anything and I didn't think about anything except the way Lily had stood in my doorway 6 weeks ago and said, I'm allowed to tell you now, right? My 11-year-old daughter had been the keeper of a war chest she had only partially read. She had been at the notary in 2020. She had been chauffeured to Asheville by my father. She had written a letter to a judge when she was 12 years old, and she had carried that knowledge inside her chest for 6 years without telling me. When I went up to her room that night, she was reading a book. She looked up at me. She didn't ask if I had opened the safe. She just nodded once and said, It's okay. He said you would do it when she came back. He said you wouldn't open it before. I sat down on the edge of her bed. I said, Lily, when you wrote that letter, were you scared? She said, Of her? No. I was scared that nobody would believe me when she came back. Grandpa said, Write it down. Get it stamped. Put it where it can't be lost. He said the worst part of being a kid is that no one trusts what you remember. I want to talk about my father for one. Paragraph. My father was a man who built bridges. Literally, he spent 41 years designing the load-bearing structures of bridges in the Carolinas. He was not warm. He didn't say, I love you easily. He sent birthday cards. He fixed your car. He showed up. And in the last year of his life, when he could see that his older daughter was becoming the mother of his younger daughter's abandoned children, he sat down with a granddaughter he barely got to know and built her a bridge. He taught her how to make her own memory legally binding. He drove her to a notary. He paid for the stamp. He told her where the key was. He died believing one day his older daughter would open a safe and find her own protection waiting for her. He didn't save me from anything in life. He saved me from a courtroom. There is a difference. I gave Beatrice everything the next morning. She spread it out on her oak desk like cards. She organized them in a black accordion folder labeled Bennett versus Bennett. Whitaker. She made copies. She filed exhibit numbers. She drafted a witness list. She said, We are not going to surprise the court. We are going to surprise the petitioner. The judge will receive a sealed envelope before the hearing begins. The contents will be discussed in chambers. They will not know what is in it until I slide it across the table. I said, Beatrice, I want one envelope, not a binder. She said, "Why?" I said, "Because she has a binder. I want what I have to look small." Beatrice smiled for the first time since I'd met her. She said, "Morgan, I like the way you think." The hearing was set for Tuesday, May 12th. The Friday before the hearing, Beatrice and I sat with Lily in the conference room and walked her through her sworn statement. Lily, 18 years old, 6 weeks into being a legal adult, signed the bottom of a typed affidavit with the same Pilot G2 pen I had used to sign her pre-K registration in 2013. She snorts said, "Aunt Mo, did I do okay?" I said, "You did everything I couldn't do at 38 at 12. She didn't cry. She just nodded once and said, "Let's go home." On Monday night, May 11th, I sat in the kitchen with the three of them. Ethan, 16, was on the couch with his headphones on, and I knew he was listening to Caitlin's podcast because he'd been listening to it on a loop for 3 weeks. He had a notebook open on his lap. He was snorts writing down everything she'd said. He wasn't crying. He was studying her the way you study tumor on a scan. I had taught him by accident how to look at things he was afraid of. Madeline was at the table doing math. She kept touching the small silver cross around her neck, the one my father had given her at her first communion in 2020. "Snorts," she said. "Aunt Mo, if the judge picks her, do we have to go to Florida?" I said, "Sweetheart, no one is picking anyone. You don't get traded like baseball cards." She thought about that. She said, "Then why do I feel like a baseball card?" I didn't have an answer. Lily, 18, walked in from the living room. She set the sealed envelope from April 16, 2020, on the kitchen island in front of me. The notary tape was unbroken. The block letters were the same as the night I had first seen them in the safe. She had a sticker of a small gold star she had put on the corner when she was 12, slightly faded now. She said, "Don't let anyone open this except the judge, not even me, not even you." I said, "I won't." She kissed the top of my head. Again, the second time in her life. She went up to her room. I stayed at the island for a long time. I did not sleep. Tuesday morning, May 12th, the sun came up at 6:09 over Cary, North Carolina. We arrived at the Wake County District Court at 8:45. The press was on the sidewalk. There were maybe 9 or 10 of them. A WRAL pool van, the News and Observer, the Cary Citizen, 2 photographers from Independent Stringers. Beacon Strategies had clearly worked overtime on this. I held Lily's hand. We did not speak. Beatrice walked behind us in a navy suit and flat shoes. The flat shoes, she had told me, were so she could run if she needed to. She was joking, I think. Inside the courtroom, room 302B, the gallery had 22 seats. 2 reporters were in the back row, by request and with the judge's permission. The rest of the room was family. Trevor Whitaker, 48 years old, sat in the front row on the petitioner's side with 2 very small children. The boy Jasper was 7. The girl Hadley was 5. They were dressed up. Hadley had a ribbon in her hair. They didn't understand where they were. Trevor sat with his hands on his knees and a clean blank face. I noted the wedding ring. I noted the lack of expression. I noticed that he was the only adult in the room besides Beatrice who was not performing. My mother sat behind Trevor 2 rows back. She did not look at me. Lily and Ethan and Madeline sat behind me on the respondent side, 2 benches back with Annabelle between them. Madeline held Annabelle's hand. Ethan stared at his shoes. Lily watched the door. Caitlin walked in at 8:57. She was wearing a Navy Theory suit, a 4-carat ring on her left hand, a small silk scarf Hermes around her neck. She did not look at Trevor. She did not look at her children. She nodded to her lawyer, Vincent Caldwell, and sat down at the petitioner's table. The judge entered at 9 o'clock. Honorable Helena Voss, 64 years old, 22 years on the bench, from Charleston, glasses on, a chain, slow walker. She had the kind of stillness that made everyone in the room sit up. Caldwell opened. He talked for 22 minutes. He talked beautifully. He had been a trial lawyer for 28 years and he knew how to hold a room. He described his client as a mother who had lost everything in a medical crisis, who had spent 11 years rebuilding, who had earned her PTSD diagnosis and her therapy hours and her master's degree and her clean record and her loving second marriage. He described me as a controlling guardian who had built a wall of refusal. He filed 41 pages of supporting exhibits, therapy records, a character letter from a state senator from Florida, photographs of a beautiful house, photographs of Caitlin holding Hadley at a beach, a bank statement, a signed statement from a Beacon Strategies media consultant about Caitlin's long road of advocacy work. Caitlin cried twice on cue. Once at the word children, once at the word mother. Beatrice did not object once. I watched Caitlin look back over her shoulder one time during the opening. Her eyes scanned the gallery the way a stranger scans a hotel lobby. She landed on Lily, registered her, looked away. She looked at Ethan. She paused. She narrowed her eyes. She leaned across to Caldwell. She whispered something. Caldwell didn't answer. She'd asked which one was Ethan. She didn't know what her son looked like at 16. Madeline, 13, sitting 2 benches behind, saw her mother's gaze cross her face like a beam in a lighthouse, missing her entirely. Madeline put her hand on Annabelle's wrist. Annabelle covered it. When Caldwell finished, he sat down. He looked at Beatrice the way trial lawyers look at opposing counsel they have already underestimated. Beatrice did not look at him. She stood up. She had no binder. She had a single white legal-size envelope. She said, "Your Honor, before I proceed with witnesses, I would like to address one preliminary matter. My client has been the court-appointed permanent legal guardian of these 3 children since February 9, 2015, under an order of this very court. The petitioner has referred to her in newspapers circulated across this county as a kidnapper. That word is not just false, it is actionable. We are not, today, seeking damages, but the record should reflect that the underlying premise of this petition is built on a public statement my client could pursue in a separate forum." Voss looked over her glasses. She said, "Noted, counsel." Caldwell shifted in his chair. Beatrice called her first witness. Ruth Pemberton walked up the aisle. Slowly. She was 71. She walked with a slight limp from a hip she had not gotten replaced. She was wearing a navy cardigan and orthopedic shoes. She carried a brown leather notary book that looked older than she was. She set it on the witness stand the way other people set down a Bible. Beatrice said, "Mrs. Pemberton, please state your profession." "Snorts," Ruth said. "I have been a notary public in the state of North Carolina since 1978. I run a stationery store on Haywood Road in Asheville. I have notarized over 12,000 documents in my career." Beatrice said, "Do you recognize this document?" She slid Caitlin's voluntary relinquishment across. Ruth looked at it. She opened her brown notary book to a page marked with a small red tab. She read aloud, "Entry number 2014, 0814/Bennett. Caitlin Bennett. 3-page document. Voluntary relinquishment of parental rights. Notarized in my store on August 18, 2014 at 4:11 in the afternoon. Photo identification verified by North Carolina driver's license. Witness fee paid in cash, $25. Beatrice said. Was there anyone with her? Ruth said. Her father waited outside in the parking lot. I saw him when she came in. He didn't come in until after she signed. He paid the fee. She laughed when she walked back out. She said, "Well, that's the end of that." Caldwell stood up. He said, "Objection, relevance." Voss said, "Overruled." "Sit down, counselor." Caldwell sat down. Caitlin's face moved. For the first time since she had walked into the courtroom, just slightly, the edge of her mouth. Beatrice called her second witness. Coach Andrew Sutton walked up the aisle. He was 56, wearing a coach's polo with a high school crest on it. He snorts had been Lily's coach since she was 13. Beatrice said, "Coach Sutton, in the 6 years you have coached Lily Bennett, how many games, practices, or parent meetings did Caitlin Whitaker attend?" Sutton said, "0. Beatrice said, "And how many did Morgan Bennett attend?" Sutton said, "All of them. I brought my records." He set down a stack of game roster sheets, 86 in total. Each one had Morgan Bennett's signature in the Guardian present line. He set down another stack, Booster Club volunteer sign-in sheets, fundraiser receipts, and the carpool log from the team's spring tournament in Wilmington. Voss took the top sheet. She held it for a moment. She set it down. She nodded slowly. Caldwell did not stand up. Beatrice called her third witness. Lillian Bennett walked up the aisle. She was wearing a black blazer over a white shirt. No makeup. She held a single sealed envelope. She set it on the witness stand and did not let go of it. She was sworn in. Beatrice said, "Lily, what is in this envelope?" Lily said, "It's a letter I wrote when I was 12. I had it notarized in 2020 by Mrs. Pemberton. My grandfather drove me. I asked that it not be opened unless I turned 18 or unless my biological mother came back to claim me. Both have happened, Your Honor. I am asking you to open it." Voss said, "Are you of sound mind, Miss Bennett?" Lily said, "Yes." Voss said, "Are you doing this without coercion?" Lily said, "Yes." Voss said, "Has anyone in this courtroom seen the contents of this envelope to your knowledge?" Lily said, "No, ma'am. Not even me. I haven't read it since I sealed it." Voss took a silver letter opener from a leather case on her desk. She slid it. Under the flap of the envelope, the notary tape snapped. The gold star sticker, faded but still visible, lifted with the seal. She read for 14 seconds in silence. Then she lifted her head. She did not look at Lily. She looked at Caitlin. She said, "Do they know she signed this?" Beatrice said, "Not yet, Your Honor." Voss said, "Then I am going to read 3 things aloud on the record with the petitioner present. Counsel for petitioner, you may move to recess." "I will decline." "Be seated." Caldwell said, "Your Honor, with respect, I would like a brief recess." Voss said, "I said decline." "Be seated." Caldwell sat. Voss read. She read the relinquishment first. The full first page. Caitlin's name. The phrase of sound mind and full legal capacity. The phrase voluntarily and permanently. the 3 children's names, the notary line, the signature. She read the rehab letter second. The yellow legal pad paper. If I ever come back claiming these children, do not believe me. It will not be because I miss them. It will be because I need something. Caitlin Bennett. She paused. Then she opened the third document, Lily's letter. The letter Lily had written at 12. She read it slowly. Your Honor, by the time you read this, I will be 18 or my biological mother will have come back asking for me. Both things mean the same thing. I am writing this so that nobody can put words in my mouth later about who I am or who my family is. My family is Morgan Bennett. She is my mother. She has been my mother since I was 6 years old. She brushed my hair when I had lice in 2nd grade. She held my hand when I broke my wrist sliding into third base. Snorts. She paid for my braces. She drove 11 hours to a tournament in Tennessee and slept in the car so my brother could have the hotel bed because he gets bad nights. She is not perfect. She does not pretend to be. She is just present every day. I am not a child to be reclaimed. I am a person who already chose. If you are reading this and considering taking me or my brother or my sister out of her home, please do not. Please do not let anyone undo what I have already lived. Lillian Bennett, age 12. The courtroom was quiet for one beat. In the front row, Trevor Whitaker stood up. He did not say anything. He picked up Jasper from the bench. He took Hadley's hand. He walked very slowly down the aisle toward the back of the courtroom. He did not look at his wife. He did not look at the judge. He walked out into the hallway and the door closed behind him with a small click. Caitlin reached across the table for him. Her fingers closed on air. She was still smiling. She had not stopped smiling since she had walked into the room. The smile had become something else now. It had become a thing that didn't belong on her face. Voss said, "Mrs. Whitaker, stand, please." Caitlin stood. Voss said, "The petition is denied with prejudice. The order of permanent guardianship granted to Morgan Bennett in February of 2015 remains in full force. Court costs are assessed to the petitioner. Counsel, your pro hac vice admission is hereby revoked. The associate of record will be receiving a separate communication from this court regarding his absence at both pre-trial conferences. We are adjourned." The gavel came down. Once, Caitlin sat down. The smile went away. She looked at the back door of the courtroom. Trevor was already gone. If you have made it this far, if your hands are a little tight on whatever you're holding right now, take a breath and tell me in the comments. Did you see the moment she lost it? Was it the relinquishment? Was it the letter? Was it her own husband walking out? I want to know. In the hallway, the 2 reporters were on their phones. The story had already changed shape. By 2 p.m., the original Beacon Strategies press release had been pulled from the Cary Citizen website. By 4 p.m., the News and Observer had run a follow-up piece. By 6 p.m., Halbert Athletic had blocked Caitlin's profile on every channel after Beatrice's cease and desist landed in their legal inbox. Beacon Strategies, when contacted for comment, declined. Trevor Whitaker filed for divorce on Thursday, May 14th. He moved out of the Naples house with Jasper and Hadley by the weekend. I learned later, through a discovery filing Beatrice obtained, that Trevor had been told by Caitlin in 2019 that her 3 older children had been taken from her by the state during her addiction recovery. He had married a woman who had told him an entirely different version of the relinquishment than the one she had signed. I do not know what is happening between Caitlin and Trevor now. I do not need to know. I am told they are still negotiating. I am told the two younger children are with Trevor and a court-appointed therapist. I do know one thing. I know that on the way home from the courthouse with Lily in the back seat and Beatrice in the passenger seat, Lily said for the first time since she was small, "I'm tired." She slept the entire ride home. She had been holding that envelope up for 6 years. My mother called me 6 times between Wednesday and Sunday. I did not answer the first 5. I answered the 6th on Sunday morning at 9:11. She said, "Morgan, you've punished her enough. Please." I said, "Mom, I'm not angry. I just need a year. Don't call her. Don't text the kids. Don't tell anyone in the family our address. Don't ask me to forgive on your timeline. 1 year. After a year, we can talk about what comes next." She said, "She's still my daughter, Morgan." Said, "And she's been your only daughter for 11 years. I'm asking you for one of mine." I hung up. I put the phone face down on the counter. Madeline came down the stairs about 10 minutes later. She had made a tray of blueberry muffins. She had taken maple syrup and written one word in syrup on top of a small white plate, then placed a single muffin on it. The word was 4 letters long. "Mom." She said it in front of me. She did not say anything. She turned around and went back upstairs. Ethan came down 2 hours later. He had taken his headphones off. He had stopped listening to the podcast. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table. He looked older than 16. Snorts. He had not slept well in 3 weeks. He said, "You're not my aunt. You're my mom. Sorry it took me this long. I think I needed to hear her one more time before I could stop." I said, "You don't owe me an apology, baby." He said, "I'm not apologizing. I'm just saying it out loud so it's said." Lily was on a Zoom call with her UNC academic advisor when Ethan said that. She missed it. She'll learn about it later when one of us slips and tells her. She will be glad to have missed it. She has had to be the oldest of 3 for 18 years. She deserves the moment she doesn't have to witness. That night, May 18th, after everyone else was asleep, I went back into the utility closet one more time. I opened the Honeywell safe with my father's birthday. I had thought it was empty. I was wrong. Behind the file folder in a thin slot at the back of the safe was one more envelope. It had no notary stamp. It had no name on the front. The handwriting on the back was my father's. It said, "For Morgan after." I sat on the closet floor and opened it. It was a single page. It was dated March 12, 2019, 3 months before he died. He had known then. He had known something was coming, whether it was his own death or something else. He had used a black ballpoint pen. The pen had run out of ink near the second to last sentence, and he had switched to a blue one without rewriting. "Morgan, you were always the one who stayed. I am sorry I never said it out loud. I was raised by men who didn't say it. I am breaking that by writing this down. I gave you the safe because I trusted you with the worst version of my daughter, the version her own mother cannot bear to see. You are not the cold one in this family. You are the only warm one. I asked Lily to keep the key because she is the kind of child who keeps promises. I knew you would not open the safe until you had to because you have never opened anything that wasn't necessary in your life. The day you open this letter is the day you don't need me anymore. I am very sorry it took my death for you to be free of asking permission. Be the kind of mother you are. Stop asking the rest of us if it counts. It counts. Dad. I sat on the floor of the utility closet for a long time. I did not cry the way you might think. I cried the way a person cries when they realize the person who saw them most clearly has been dead for 7 years, and that they were seen anyway all that time by someone who did not need to be present in the room to keep watching. I cried because my sister, my actual sister, the one I had grown up with, the one I had shared a bedroom with at 9 and 11, the one whose hair I had braided before school dances, had died in 1990-something inside a person who looked exactly like her. The Caitlin in the courtroom in the Navy theory suit was a stranger who happened to wear my sister's face. I had not lost her last Tuesday. I had lost her on a Sheetz receipt in August of 2014. I just hadn't been allowed to grieve her yet. I cried because Lily had carried a sealed envelope for 6 years and never told me. And because she had been able to do that only because she had a grandfather who knew how to teach a 12-year-old that her own memory was worth a notary's stamp. I cried because I had been waiting my whole life to be told that what I did counted. And then I stopped crying. I closed the safe. I put the Atlas Shrugged back on the shelf with the key inside the back cover. I turned off the closet light. I went into the kitchen. The muffin was still on the plate Madeline had left. The syrup had soaked into the muffin's edges. The word Mom was a little blurred but still legible. I ate it standing up. Then I went upstairs and looked in on each of them. Madeline asleep with her cross on the pillow. Ethan asleep with his headphones around, his neck charging. Lily asleep with her Yunzi welcome packet open across her chest. I want to tell you what I have learned. I have learned that being called a kidnapper in a newspaper in a courtroom by your own sister, in front of your mother, is not the worst thing that can happen to you. The worst thing is being called a kidnapper and starting to wonder for a single bad second if maybe you were. The second after that, when you remember the porch and the formula bottle and the disconnected number and the 11 years of softball games and broken wrists and braces, that second is when you become unkidnappable. I have learned that the people who tell you they're rebuilding are sometimes building a case against you out of the bricks of your own life. I have learned that a child can know more than you think she knows. That a 12-year-old can read a courtroom from 6 years away. That a grandfather can build a paper trail bridge, while you are too tired to notice that he's been driving your niece to Asheville on Saturdays. I have learned that a half-empty bottle of formula kept in a fireproof box for 11 years is heavier than a 4-carat ring. I have learned that the silence at the end of a 6-second pause from your own mother is the sound of your family choosing. I have learned that justice, when it comes, is not loud. It is a judge with reading glasses on a chain saying 4 words quietly, while the room rearranges itself around them. And I have learned, finally, that motherhood is not a thing you are born into. It is not a thing you bleed your way into. It is not granted by genes or by the act of carrying a child for 9 months. It is granted slowly, day after day, by the people who choose to wake up and feed someone else's child and call it Tuesday. Motherhood isn't biology. It's who stays. I stayed. That's the whole story. Did you like this story? Which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you enjoyed this, support the channel with a super thanks so I can keep bringing you more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next one.